few years ago, I had the responsibility in the seminary to teach the theology of the Westminster Confession of Faith, that document that was produced in the 17th century in England by the Westminster Divines that is the most comprehensive, systematic expression of historic Reformed theology ever set on paper. And I had done the first chapter of the Confession, and I finished the second chapter of the Confession, and I announced after that, I said, next week, we're going to take up chapter 3, which chapter is entitled, Of God's Eternal Decrees. Now, as soon as I announced that, there was a stir among the students. I mean, they knew what that meant. They said, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, that means he's going to get into predestination and all that juicy stuff that has to do with God's sovereignty and human freedom and the things that every theological student in seminary likes to argue into the night. So the next Monday evening, when I came to the classroom, there were 150 students there. There were like 50 guests. Every one of my Reformed students went out and drugged one of their Arminian friends by the neck. They said, our professor's going to speak on predestination this week, and you have to be there and listen. So I have these people waiting, breathless anticipation to look at this difficult doctrine. And I began by reading the opening words of chapter 3 of the Westminster Confession. Let me read them for you now. Chapter 3 begins with these words, God, from all eternity, did by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will, freely and immutably, that is, unchangeably, ordain whatsoever comes to pass, semicolon. Let me state it again in other words. That God, from all eternity, according to his holy counsel, doth freely and immutably ordain whatsoever comes to pass. Semicolon. I read that and I stopped and I said to the class, I said, all right, how many of you believe that? How many of you believe that God foreordains every single thing that happens? Automobile accidents, train wrecks, the birth of baby, the death of your spouse. God ordains it. Everything that comes to pass. How many of you believe it? 100 hands went up. These were Reformed students. These guys were fighting for the angels. This was old hat to them. They didn't have any problem with it. I said, okay, how many of you don't believe it? 50 hands went up. I said, fine. I said, okay, let me ask another question. How many of you would freely acknowledge that you are atheists? I said, don't be afraid. Tell the truth. Nobody's going to take down names. Nobody's going to report you to authorities. Nobody's going to take out matches and burn you at the stake. How many of you would call yourselves atheists? And nobody put their hand up. And I was flabbergasted. I immediately went into my Lieutenant Columbo routine. You know, I said, wait a minute. I said, there's just one thing I don't understand here. And I said, do you mind if I ask you a personal question? I was talking to the wife the other night, and she said, I just can't figure this out. And I played this little game with him, and I said, let me see if I get this straight. You're telling me you don't believe that God ordains whatsoever comes to pass, but you're not an atheist. I can't put those two together. I said, don't you realize that so far, up to the semicolon of what I've read, this statement in the Westminster Confession has nothing in it that is distinctively Calvinistic or Reformed. It has nothing in it that's even uniquely Christian. Every Jew would affirm what I've just read. Every Muslim would affirm what I've just read. Any cogently thinking theist would have to affirm what I just read. We haven't even gotten to the Reformed doctrine of predestination yet. All it says is that from all eternity God ordains whatsoever comes to pass. I said, what that statement affirms is that God is sovereign over everything that happens. But the great Augustine in the 4th century made the comment, carefully now, think carefully, that God ordains, at least in some sense, everything that comes to pass. It may be in a passive sense, what some people call God's will of permission. That's a little bit misleading, that term, as if he gives his endorsement or sanction on your sin. He permits your sin in the sense that he doesn't stop you from doing it, but he doesn't sanction it. But any time that you commit a sin, God at that moment always had the power to prevent you from doing it. He could have squashed you like a bug, taken the breath out of your lungs at that minute and stopped you from doing it. And the fact that he didn't intervene, that he didn't intrude, the fact that he decided to let you do it, not with his blessing, but to give you the ability to do it without preventing you from doing it, in a certain sense, you see, he chose that it should come to pass. Because he is absolutely sovereign over everything that happens. And I said, do you realize that if there's one maverick molecule running loose in this cosmos, beyond the pale, beyond the scope of God's sovereign control and authority, you have no reason as a Christian to believe a single promise of the future that God has made. One maverick molecule could destroy all of the plans, not only of mice and men, but of Almighty God, if God does not ordain whatsoever comes to pass. Remember when you were children, you learned a little story. For one of the nail, the shoe was lost. For one of the shoe, the horse was lost. For one of the horse, the rider was lost. For one of the rider, the battle was lost. For one of the battle, the war was lost. All because one nail. When I was a boy, one of my heroes was a race driver by the name of Bill Vukovich, who was killed in the Indianapolis 500. When that super expensive piece of machinery, a prototype, costing tens of thousands of dollars to build and construct, failed in a turn because a 10-cent cotter pin broke. A grain of sand in the kidney of Oliver Cromwell changed the course of history. A piece of lead in the brain of John F. Kennedy changed the course of American history. At the Battle of Fort Duquesne in the French and Indian War, a young lieutenant had 5 horses shot out from under him, and one bullet from an enemy rifle went through his shirt as it flapped in the breeze, and it went in one side of his shirt and out the other side of the shirt without even creasing the skin on his back. And he survived that battle, and George Washington became the first president of the United States. You know, a tenth of an inch, and he wouldn't have survived that battle of Fort Duquesne. But by chance, he made it. Through the fortunes of circumstances, Kennedy was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know. One maverick molecule outside the authority of God's sovereign control could thwart his plans and prevent the return of Christ, could prevent the vindication of faith that you hold dear. Beloved, there is no such thing as chance. I was in a discussion once with a professor at Harvard University. He taught in the graduate school at Harvard in the field of the philosophy of science. And we were talking about the origin of the cosmos. And he didn't believe in God, and I said, well, where do you think the universe came from? And he said, well, the universe was created by chance. And I said, the universe was created by chance. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I said, are you telling me that the power supply for everything that is, the Big Bang of the entire universe, that was ultimately caused by chance? And he said, yes. I said, that's amazing. I said, don't you realize that chance can't do anything? He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, let me show you what I mean. And I took a coin out of my hand, out of my pocket, and I said, I'll say to you here, if I took a 50-cent piece and balanced it on my thumb, and I said to you, I'm going to flip this coin up in the air, what are the chances that it comes up head or tails? What's the chances? Go ahead. 1 and 2. What's the percentage? 50-50. No. 50-50. Now listen to what I said. I said, if I flip the coin, what are the chances that it comes up heads or tails? 100%. Unless it stands on its head somehow. I fooled you, didn't I? Okay, what we mean, though, is I said, okay, if I flip that coin, what are the chances that it'll come up heads? 50-50, a 50% chance. Because there are only two options. There's only two sides to the coin. And so we say the odds are, the chances are, that it'll come up heads 50% of the time. Now, what I asked this gentleman from Harvard was, how much influence does chance exert on the flip of the coin? What causes that coin to come up heads? Does it have anything to do with where I start, whether it's heads up or tails up? How much pressure I exert with my thumb, the density of the atmosphere, how many revolutions it makes, whether I catch it here, here, or here, and after I catch it, whether I turn it over or don't turn it over. There are all those variables. We could add to those variables so many complexities that would drive us nuts trying to predict how it's going to turn out. But we can cut the Gordian knot. We can reduce the options to the simple options that are there mathematically. The mathematical possibilities are there can be 1 and 2. And so I say the chances are 50-50 that it's going to come up heads. But how much power, how much force does chance exert? Absolutely none. I said to that professor, chance cannot do anything because chance isn't anything. He said, what do you mean? I said, the word chance is a word that we use, a cipher, a symbol, to describe mathematical possibilities. You're now giving to chance not just an empty word to describe possibilities, you're giving it being, power, ability to do work. I said chance can do nothing because chance is not a thing. It's not an entity. It is no thing. Let me say it again. It is no thing. Faster. It is no thing. Even faster. It is nothing. Do you see that? Chance has no being, and if it has no being, it has no power. For something to do something, it first must be. And when I said that, that good professor went like this. Yes, of course. What could people? Well, he says, I can't believe I made that mistake. Isn't it interesting that some of the most foolish mistakes are the kinds of mistakes made by the most learned and brilliant of people? Chance can't do anything. What are the chances that the universe was created by chance? Huh? Not a chance. Because to say that the universe was created by chance is to say that the universe was created by nothing. And I realize that there are intelligent people who say that. In effect, because people are saying that the universe created itself. That's madness. For something to create itself, to be self-created, would require what? For something to create itself, it would have to be when? Before it was. To create itself, it would have to be before it created itself to be what it is. It's giving me a headache. It would have to be and not be at the same time and in the same relationship. The most fundamental violation of reason is to say something like that. Nothing can create itself. Nothing can do nothing. And people argue about creation, and I say to them, do you believe that anything exists now? Do you exist now? Is there anything here? Even if you think it's all an illusion, do you think the illusion's here? I say, where'd it come from? Ladies and gentlemen, if anything exists now, this is elementary, then there never could have been a time when there was nothing. Because the most fundamental maxim of all reason and all science and all philosophy is the maxim ex nihilo nihil fit. Out of nothing, nothing comes. If there was ever a time when there was nothing, the only thing there could possibly be now couldn't possibly be now. Because the only thing there could be would be nothing. And nothing is not something. Not even a little something. Not even a microscopic something. Not even a subatomic something. It is nothing. And if there was ever a time that there was nothing, there is be nothing now. So there always had to be something. Something that had the very power of being within itself, or nothing could possibly be. Is there anything more elementary than that? If the equation is God or chance, the only possible solution, ladies and gentlemen, is God. Because chance can do nothing. Well, what does that mean about atheism? I said, if you believe in chance, that things happen by chance, what you're saying is God is not sovereign. I've never met a Christian yet. I've met plenty of people who weren't Christians who denied the sovereignty of God, but I've never met a Christian who said, I do not believe in the sovereignty of God. Every Christian says he believes in the sovereignty of God. But it takes about 5 minutes to probe that to discover that not 1 out of 100 Christians believe in the sovereignty of God. As soon as you begin to examine it, there's precious little sovereignty left. If God is not sovereign, God is not God. It's that simple.